Hi everyone, we are Group D and our focus project is the Sydney Cross City Tunnel. The Cross City Tunnel is a major project that was undertaken in the early 2000s, linking Darling Harbour in Sydney CBD to Rushcutters Bay. The Cross City Tunnel project involved the financing, design, operation and maintenance of two 2.1 kilometre tunnels. The aim of the project was to reduce traffic in the growing city, bypassing inner city roads and speeding up travel times. It was thought the Cross City Tunnel project would be a huge success, saving motorists time by avoiding 18 sets of traffic lights. However, controversy, high tolls, and lower than expected usage left many believing the project failed. The first member of our team is Thomas, whose focus of study was project stakeholder management. The Sydney Cross City Tunnel encountered several setbacks which incurred costs and ultimately increased the toll of using the tunnel. The relationship between major stakeholders and the government disintegrated throughout the project and thereafter. The Stakeholder Management Plan section of this presentation will focus on why this happened by highlighting the significance and limitations of the project management concepts and tools, in addition to drawing on relevant literature. My name is Noah, and my area of study is project time management. The most common cause of project failure is a lack of project time management. Unlike the difficulties faced with cost management of this project, the time management proved to be one of the only successful features of the overall project. Therefore, due to it being an important PMBOK area of knowledge, the time management of the Cross City Tunnel will be investigated. Our next team member is Jordan, who focused on the cost management of the project. Poor estimates of time and cost are recognized as one of the major contributors to a project failing. This can be seen with the Cross City Tunnel project, which was a public-private partnership that is renowned for the financial difficulties that it faced. Therefore, as one of the project management bodies of knowledge, the cost management of the Cross City Tunnel will be investigated. The final member of our group is Craig, whose focus of study was project risk management. Without a proper risk management plan, unexpected events that may or may not occur can have a higher chance of impacting the project objectives. The Cross City Tunnel project demonstrates a plan that manages to control risks that are identified both before the start of the project and during its progression. For this reason, the process used for risk management is explored further in this presentation. By studying these PMBOK areas of knowledge, we can determine the overall success of the Cross City Tunnel.
Hi, my name is Thomas Steinthal and I will be presenting on the Stakeholder Management Plan. The Stakeholder Management Plan, as outlined in the Project Management Body of Knowledge, has 4 critical phases. This includes the identification of stakeholders, planning of stakeholder engagement, managing stakeholder engagement, and the monitoring of stakeholder engagement. Each phase will be analysed in relation to the Cross City Tunnel project, with all significant successes and failures noted. The use or disregard of project management tools will be reviewed with specific project challenges and issues addressed. The identification of stakeholders is of utmost priority in the early stages of the project initiation process group. The Sydney Cross City Tunnel project needed to consider multiple major stakeholders at the outset of the project. Before the project was initiated, there needed to be a clear requirement for the tunnel to be constructed. The government and RTA were planning for future road congestion and furthermore needed to act on their Action for Transport 2010 plan, which was a framework to guide the development and management of all land transport in New South Wales. The key stakeholders that needed to be identified from the outset included the public and future motorists using the tunnel, the private entity constructing and operating the tunnel under the Booch scheme, the construction contractor being Belfinger Burgle, the Roads Traffic Authority being the client, private equity financiers, and state government officials. Data analysis and gathering are listed under PMBOK tools used in the identification of stakeholders. Peter Phibbs notes in his journal article in The Built Environment that the Cross City Tunnel failed under 3 reasons, one being incorrect traffic forecasting. This ultimately led to the consortium, the Cross City Motorway Group, going into receivership. Therefore, it could be assumed that the project did not incorporate the correct use of the PMBOK tools and stunted the success of the tunnel from the outset. The stakeholder management plan is a quintessential element of the overall project management plan, where resource, communication, and risk management come into play. It describes the way in which stakeholders and the project interact, with special consideration on the amount of interest that will be shown by each stakeholder and their ability to control it. The stakeholder engagement with the government was exemplified when the Minister for Urban Affairs and Planning issued conditions of approval for the project in October 2001. The input of enterprising environmental factors noted in PMBOK is relevant to the Cross-City Tunnel project, as the environmental impact assessment required updating after the identification of potential risks. The supplementary EIS was produced and as such made changes to the construction, incurring additional costs to the project. The managed stakeholder engagement phase ensures that interactions are kept transparent and ongoing with all major stakeholders. Any updates to the stakeholder management plan need to be verified with a change request being completed. Throughout the Cross-City Tunnel project, multiple changes occurred, greatly impacting the project costs and creating conflict between the government, the RTA, and cross-city motorways. Tools and techniques provided in PMBOK for this stage promotes using appropriate communication and team skills. Knowing the relationship breakdown between the client and stakeholders suggests that there was incorrect negotiation, conflict management, and political awareness. In addition to this, clear communication needed to be ongoing with the public, as they would be the motorists using the tunnel, but did not occur. The Joint Selection Committee produced findings identifying a lack of community consultation, noting a continuity of consultation and information throughout all stages of the project may have minimized the hostile reaction to the tunnel on opening. The last phase in project stakeholder management is to implement routine effectiveness checks in relation to the stakeholder management plan. It is part of the monitoring and controlling process group and includes actions such as reviewing stakeholder communications and gathering information pertaining to stakeholder satisfaction of project progress or any concerns. There is insufficient evidence suggesting that the cross-city motorway executed routine checks of the stakeholder management plan. Further to this, the amount of public scrutiny and backlash caused the need for a committee to review the project and stakeholder management. The Joint Selection Committee was required to provide a report on multiple facets of the project execution and closure. There were 17 recommendations made, demonstrating improper review processes and inability to monitor stakeholder engagement by the consortium.
Project time management is a key PMBOK area of knowledge that was vital in the successful completion of the Cross-City Tunnel. Time management refers to the ability of a project manager in planning and organizing the time that is spent on activities which can ultimately result in cost and time savings of the overall project. Over the duration of the project, there were several key milestones that affected the completion of the Cross-City Tunnel and demonstrated the importance of effective time management. In 1998, the New South Wales State Government released the Action for Transport 2010 report, an ambitious transport plan that was designed to solve all of Sydney's significant transport problems. Following the release of this report, the Road and Traffic Authority started preparations of a conceptual design for the Cross-City Tunnel. Initially, the Cross-City Tunnel was designed to be 1.2 kilometres long and run between College and Harbour Street as seen in the following figure. To further reduce city traffic, following extensive consultations, there was a consensus to build a longer tunnel that connects to the existing King's Cross Tunnel as seen above. On October 3, 2001, an initial planning approval for the design, which was subject to 240 conditions, was granted by the Minister of Urban Affairs and Planning. 3 weeks after the approval of this plan, private organisations submitted detailed proposals to the Road and Traffic Authority suggesting a range of possible design modifications. Through consultations with multiple government agencies, the RTA opted for one of the modified alternatives as it offered better value than the current approved design concept. This caused a delay in the project as further environmental impact statements and approval was needed before the construction could begin. Once the environmental impact statements were completed, the final design of the tunnel was approved with 292 conditions and signed off by the Minister in late 2002. Given this approval, construction of the project began in January of 2003 with completion scheduled for October 2005. Other than a few design modifications in 2004, due to the successful planning of the project, the Cross-City Tunnel was announced to open to the public 4 months early. Unfortunately, due to unfinished electrical work in the tunnel, a last-minute decision was made to delay the highly anticipated launch for another 2 months. Through successful time management, although the project experienced a few delays, it was successfully completed 2 months ahead of schedule. Although the project finished early, it does not mean that the overall time management cannot be improved. A major factor that could be improved was to finalize the project design before the environmental impact statements are completed. As stated by the RTA, one of the things that will strike you is that the actual planning approval was completed before the detailed proposals were submitted. Due to the changing design of the tunnel, completing environmental impact statements and getting the Minister's approval before a contractor was found resulted in significant delays to the project. Therefore, finalizing the design of the tunnel before getting approval will reduce the overall length of the project. Another factor that can be improved for this project was earlier consultation of the public. Just before construction began on the tunnel and after the conclusion of a public consultation on the design, it was decided that a ventilation tunnel was to be constructed to reduce the number of ventilation shafts required. As identified in the Cross-City Tunnel First Report, this was a significant issue in the planning of the project. This means that by consulting the public earlier on the design, major changes can be made without having drastic influences on the project duration. In summary, although the project experienced some significant issues and had room for improvements, the overall time management of the project can be considered successful. This is proven that through the detailed planning process and constant review of the project, time management was a key factor in the successful completion of the Cross-City Tunnel.
Hi, I'm Jordan DeBoer and I'll be focusing on project cost management. The purpose of project cost management is to ensure the project can be completed within budget while meeting the client's requirements. In the project management body of knowledge, there are 4 processes consisting of plan cost management, estimate costs, determine budget, and control costs, which should be considered in project cost management. In this section, I'll be discussing how the costs of the Cross-City Tunnel project were managed. As with any large infrastructure project, there are usually substantial costs involved. Therefore, a cost-benefit analysis was performed to determine whether the project would be a worthwhile investment. The costs were likely determined using a top-down apportionment method. The expected costs could then be weighed against the benefits. It was found the project could meet its goals with huge road user time savings estimated to be worth around $738 million. Overall, it was determined the project had a positive benefit to cost ratio and therefore should progress. The cost-benefit analysis can be seen in this table. The Cross-City Tunnel project had to be approved by the Budget Committee of Cabinet. This cabinet looked at the project processes including project definition, detailed proposals, as well as negotiations and contracts. The aim was to achieve acceptable economic and financial outcomes where the benefits exceeded the economic costs and the cost to the government is minimised. At the time the project was undertaken, the government was focused on debt reduction, which led to a policy of no net cost to the government. Therefore, the project would be funded under a public-private partnership with private entities operating and maintaining the tunnel until 2035. This resulted in the end users who would ultimately pay for the project through tolls not being adequately considered. During the tender selection process, companies were shortlisted based on the shortlist criteria seen in this slide. As a result, 3 companies were considered: the Cross-City Motorway, E-Tube Consortium, and the Sydney Tunnel Company. These companies submitted bids which were compared based on the selection criteria seen in this slide. Based on this, the Cross-City Motorways were determined to provide the best value and were awarded the contract. However, limits were placed on the negotiations where no government contribution and toll levels were non-negotiable. This had the effect of focusing on the government's net zero cost rather than value for money for the end users. As discussed in the Joint Select Committee in 2006, it should be ensured that the interest of the public is best served before opening projects to the private sector in the future. The project had a cost management plan based on the work breakdown structure. This allowed direct costs, direct project overhead costs, and general administrative costs to be estimated. It was difficult to find the project's work breakdown structure, however, it is expected they used a bottom-up approach for each work package as the project progressed. A resource management plan was created which included parameters such as rates of pay and travel costs and more, which was estimated for different personnel. This can be seen in the sprinkler fitters' rates of pay seen on the slide and would have helped develop the cost baseline. The initial cost of the project was estimated to be $400 million. This was likely a top-down, rough order of magnitude estimate with low accuracy. It is likely this value was obtained applying a mixture of analogous and parametric estimating. However, after the tendering process, cross-city motorways could rely on their previous and now increased project knowledge to produce a more accurate value of $620 million. A $5 million contingency fund was used to improve risk management. Although the cost baseline could not be specifically found, it is likely performance of the project was weighted against the baseline, which assesses costs associated with the timeline of the project. As the project progressed and individual work packages were assigned, it is expected more accurate bottom-up estimates could be produced. It's expected earned value management was used as a form of cost control. This would have allowed schedule, scope, and cost baseline to be monitored. However, the final cost of construction was over budget at $680 million. This represents under a 10% variance from Cross-City Motorway's original estimate. By the end of the project, there was almost $600 million of debt which would have to be repaid. This was likely due to several factors including scope creep, inadequate cost inputs, and poor cost control. An example of this can be seen where it was estimated 350 tons of spoil would have to be removed. However, this was grossly underestimated as 500,000 tons of spoil had to be removed. Furthermore, scope creep was evident as the tunnel length was increased from 1.8 kilometers in the initial plan to 2.1 kilometers. Cross-City Motorways asked and was approved for additional work to be performed totaling $75 million, which would be funded by increasing tolls. This shows poor cost control as additional work had significant implications to the cost baseline and risk of the project. Therefore, it is clear the project management followed elements of planned cost management, estimate costs, determine budget, and cost control as seen in the figure. Therefore, the cost management in the project was it a success or failure? The project was finished early, however over cost. So was the project from a cost perspective a failure or a success? The project met the cost requirements from the government at a net zero cost to them, so in some ways it can be seen as a success. However, for the cross-city motorways, the project cost was around $1 billion, leaving significant debt. Initially, the planned tolls were to be $2.50 and $1.10 for westbound cars exiting at Sir John Young Crescent. However, the tolls were increased to $3.56 in each direction due to the increase in project scope. This led the community to believe they were not receiving value for money, and the tunnel achieved around a third of its expected usage. Subsequently, the tunnel went into receivership in 2007, which was only 2 years after its opening. The tunnel was bought for around $700 million. However, this was not the end of the tunnel's financial difficulties, with the new owners going into voluntary administration in 2014. So what could be done better? It is clear to see the cross-city motorways followed many of the processes outlined in the project management body of knowledge. They had excellent cost estimation skills and methods of determining the budget. However, issues arose under the control of costs from an increased scope. This led to increased costs and lower value for money for customers of the tunnel. More management around the change requirements and cost control would provide customers higher value for money and reduce the risk of increased costs.
Hi, my name is Craig Netter and I will be presenting on the project risk management of the Cross City Tunnel project. Before we can understand the risk management process, we should first understand what are risks. A risk can be described as an uncertain event or condition that will have a positive or negative impact on the project objective. There are events that may or may not occur during the project, but they still need to be identified and taken into consideration. Usually, the negative effect of risks is the focus when analysing risks. However, considering both positive and negative risks is a sign of a good project manager. There are three elements of a risk: the risk itself, the impact or consequence the risk will have on the project, the likelihood, probability of the risk occurring, and there are also three different types of risks. The known risk, where it is recognised by a numerous amount of people, the unknown risk, where very few people are aware of it, and the unknowable risk, which is unexpected and impossible to predict. The risk management procedure is defined as a systematic process of identifying, analysing, and responding to project risks. This is a common procedure followed by many projects these days, including the Cross City Tunnel project. The procedure was implemented throughout the entire project lifecycle, including these four key stages: risk identification, risk analysis, risk response planning, and risk monitoring and control. Identification of risks. This stage involves identifying all the possible risks that may arise during the project. It is best to establish these risks before they happen so an appropriate control can be put early into place to mitigate it. In the Cross City Tunnel project, most relevant risks were identified that could be present in both the design and construction phase. Risks that weren't identified before the start of the project were later identified during the project. For example, concerns related to the exhaust fumes from the tunnel were originally proposed to vent through the portal at the eastern end, but this was later changed to add a separate ventilation shaft to manage this risk better. This example shows how risk was still able to be identified during the progression of the project. Risk analysis. The risks that were identified are assessed and evaluated to determine their level of impact and likelihood of occurring during the project. This allowed the project manager to have an understanding of which risks were more detrimental to the project than others, and which risks had more priority over others. The Cross City Tunnel project analysed each risk that was identified through this process to find out the severity and level of impact that they would each have on the project. The risk priority matrix is an example of a tool that is used to determine the risk rating of each event that is specified. Risk monitoring and control. Mitigation measures are put in place to reduce the impact of the identified risks. During the Cross City Tunnel project, mitigation measures were put in place to ensure risks were as low as fairly practicable. This helped by reducing the impact and likelihood of the risks occurring, allowing the project to proceed with more stability and assurance. Each identified risk was matched with the relevant mitigation to confirm that all risks were considered and none were left uncontrolled. Most of these controls that were put forward before the project started. However, unexpected risks that appeared during the project still need to be controlled. Therefore, constant monitoring of risks was required to ensure that the project ran smoothly with as little deviations as possible. The overall project risk management was quite adequate, as they planned well beforehand to reduce the number of issues that inevitably arose as the project progressed. Lewis Gomes, the technical director of the project, stated that there were many risks, but they were all well considered, and I think we developed good solutions for all of them. This summarizes the project risk management very well, as it explains that all risks that occurred were considered in the procedure with controls and solutions for each one to prevent any major issues for the project outcome. Overall, the social benefits to everyone were seen to outweigh negative impacts that affected the small number of people in the area. Therefore, improvements that could be made for the project risk management can include to have more thought about how the Newbite community will be affected by the construction of the project. This was one area that could have been addressed a bit better to reduce the impact on the people around the construction zone.
A number of learning outcomes were equated from the completion of this study, including collaboration amongst all team members, ensuring effective management of the case study, further providing a transparent presentation. The in-depth research presented by each team member, representing critical analysis skills. Furthermore, by identifying the tools and techniques used by the consortium in project management, a deeper understanding was made on the key management processes in addition to all issues and challenges faced in a real project. Lastly, conclusions on each of the PM boxed areas were produced, allowing for each member to respect the limitations and significance of project management tools.
So overall, was the project successful? From a project construction standpoint, the project can be considered successful. The tunnel was finished ahead of schedule with a slight variation in cost due to increased scope. However, the tunnel was still provided at no net cost to the government. This success can be mainly contributed to the Cross-City Motorway Consortium following many of the project management processes suggested in the project management body of knowledge. This can be seen through their risk management, cost management, time management, and stakeholder management as discussed throughout the report. However, to the Cross-City Motorway Consortium and its investors, the project was a major failure. This was mainly due to insufficient public interest evaluations and too much focus on providing the tunnel to the government at net zero cost. This resulted in poor value for money for tunnel users which opted to avoid using the tunnel. However, the project provided the public with the option of using the tunnel, which would result in them saving significant time. Therefore, from a public standpoint, the project can be seen as a success. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation on the Cross-City Tunnel.